Especially in April, we think that the government is taxing us too much. In reality, however, we tax each other too, I think. I have taxed my wife's patience and love and forgiveness on many occasions, especially when we were camping. As a matter of fact, I wrote a story about our camping experiences, and I named it Camping 101, the do's and don'ts of camping. And I gave it to my wife to read, and she laughed and said, "It's the wrong title. You have to call it Camping for Dummies." Since I always want to have the last word, I said, "Yes, darling, you're right." So here comes Camping for Dummies. When we moved to Portland 30, 40 years ago, we discovered that camping was really nice, and we loved it. So we bought a nice tent. That was tent number 1. And we wanted to camp so often that we liked to do it also during weekends. The problem with the weekend was that when you arrived at 7, 8 o'clock at the campsite, there was not much to get. Now we talked to some friends of ours, Jeff and Sarah Creswell, and they had 2 little kids. And they had a little bit more flexible schedule, and they said, "No, you know what we do? We go on Friday morning. Then we have lots of choices. We will select a big campsite so that when you come at 7, 8 o'clock on Friday night, you can pitch your tent next to ours. And we go to, what was it called? Tollgate Campground, which is on Highway 26 past Sandy." And he said, if that doesn't work, Camp Creek Campground is a couple of miles up the road. We could not communicate with each other because there were no cell phones in those days. Although I do remember seeing a show where, what was his name? Get Smart. He had a dial phone in his shoe, remember that? We didn't have it. Anyway, we had divided our tasks. I was responsible for the car and for the tent, camping equipment, and my wife was responsible for the food and the clothing and the maps. So we had settled with Jeff and Sarah, a nice weekend. Friday around 4 or 5 o'clock, I load up the car, we drive through Gresham, Sandy, Tollgate Campground. Nice place. Jeff and Sarah were there, they put up the tent, they had dinner made for us, and we sat at the picnic table and we played with the kids, and after that we made a campfire, and I told Kathy, it's time for getting up the tent. So I went to the car, get my tent out, spread it out on the grass next to the tent of Jeff and Sarah, went back to the car to get the tent poles. No tent poles. No, yeah, there's no big thing. I'm an experienced camper. You simply string a rope between 2 trees and you hang the tent from the rope. That was in the good old days. This was one of those modern pop-up tents. You needed the tension of the tent poles. So whatever I did, I couldn't get a tent up. So rather sheepishly, I walked back to the campfire and say, "Kathy, I forgot the tent poles and I can get a tent up." Now Jeff heard that, and up till that time he was a pretty good friend of mine. He twisted my words, and with a smirk on his face he said, "Ah, Frans, can't you get him up anymore?" Now, and Jennifer, she was, how old was she? 3 years old. She didn't understand what her father was alluding to. So she started to shout, "Frans can get him up! Frans can get him up!" Very embarrassing. But it ended up that we were sleeping in the car. To make things worse, it started to rain, and the following morning we were standing around a wet picnic table eating our drenched breakfast, and I say, "People, can it? We go." We used that tent, however, with tent poles on many occasions. But after a couple of years, we thought we'd buy a new tent. So we got a nice second tent. And we wanted to try it out on the Oregon and the California coast. On a Saturday morning, we had 2 weeks vacation. I put the new tent in the car with flashlights and boxes with food, clothing, etc. We drive to Cannon Beach, walk around, and we go to Vanuatu, to Tillamook. We get some free cheese there, remember? You know what we did. We saw the lighthouse, Lincoln City, Newport, Boiler Bay, whatever. We end in Walport. And 6 miles south of Walport is a state park. And we have there also a campground. So we drive in the campground, we pay our fee. It's around 5 o'clock, and we've had a long day, we are tired, and I say, Kathy, can you make dinner for us, and then I will put up the new tent. I go to the car, take the tent bag out, spread it out on the grass. Want to go back to the car for the tent poles. You guessed it, no tent poles. Now in Holland, the country where I came from, we have an expression that says, a donkey doesn't stumble twice over the same stone. And here I was, for the second time, I forgot tent poles. Now, I'm a firm believer that when you're married, you have to share things with your wife. So instead of saying, I forgot the tent poles, I said, we forgot the tent poles. Let's go to Walport, buy a new tent. Now somehow I can't quite remember Kathy's reaction. I assume she said, oh Frans, you're so intelligent, nice idea buying a new tent. We jumped in the car, drove to Walport, Saturday, 5, 6 o'clock. The only place where they sold some camping equipment in those days was a hardware store. They had 2 tents, one big one. You know, the one with a vestibule, a living room, dining room, a couple of bedrooms. You need a truck to haul that thing. And there was a little backpacker's tent. And I say to Kathy, that's the one we need. That was tent number 3. We bought it. We drive to the campground and I say, nice tent that was. And so cheap. Now, Kathy, she always thinks that the glass is half empty, said, it was very expensive and it's a very small tent. But as you know, we have a good relationship, size does not matter. And we had to love each other very much because it was a very small tent. But we had a great time on the coast. We used tent number 2, however, for many years. But after 5, 10 years, we saw at REI they had wonderful tents for sale. And we bought the ultimate, a dome tent, with all the bells and whistles. And I tried it all out, and everything was there. And the neat thing was that it came in a kind of duffel bag. You could put a tent in it, and then you have a special bag for the rain fly, and a special bag for the tent poles. And you put everything in that duffel bag. But as you also know, that when you pack your car, it is nice to have some small items left, which you can push into some corners. So I didn't put everything in the bag. I left those 3 things all separate. Now, we decided we use that REI tent in the Wallowas. We had never explored that area. On Saturday morning, we had 3 weeks vacation. I packed the car. Kathy asked me, is everything there? And I say, Kathy, trust me, everything is there. We take 84, we stop in Pendleton, it's around 12 o'clock, we have a big meal. And from that point on, I think we meandered through some country roads, eventually end in Enterprise, and then we go to Joseph. It's a neat place. And from Joseph we went south, straight down along Lake Wallowa to our campsite. We passed a lodge, and almost next to it is the campsite. Great place, nice grass, a couple of big trees, wonderful view over the lake. There are already a couple of campers, and some people left food on a picnic table, and there were lots of deer, and they were of course nibbling on that food. And I said to Kathy, Dummies, Dummies. Anyway, it was by that time around 8 o'clock. It started getting a little bit dark. And since we had a big meal already, I told Kathy, if you make a little snack, then I will set up the new REI tent. I go to the car, take the big duffel bag with the tent in it out, spread the tent out on the ground. Go back to the car, pull out the rain fly, put that aside. It comes later. Tent poles. It was as if somebody punched me in my stomach. I mean, I could not breathe. I could not find the tent poles. And I remembered, I left them at home. I go to Kathy and say, I'm so sorry, but I don't have the tent poles. That's impossible, they have to be. So we went to the car, we practically dismantled the car. But I knew there were no tent poles to be found. I was secretly happy that there were campers around, because I think if they wouldn't have been around, I think my wife would have exploded. No tent poles, no usable tent. 8 o'clock Saturday night, everything is closed. I told Kathy, we have to go to a motel. I don't want to go to a stinking motel. There is that lodge. You can see through the trees. We go there. And I say, Kathy, that thing is much too expensive. We cannot pay that. I don't care. There was a little voice inside me that said, Frans, you better take your medicine. So we put everything back in the car, drove a few hundred feet to the lodge. The first car we see in the parking lot is a Jaguar, a little Lexus, and a couple of Mercedes-Benz. Our 15-year-old Toyota Corolla didn't quite fit. But I thought, in Rome they said, pecunia non olet. Money does not stick. And my money is good as anybody else's money. So we go into the office. There's a pretty lady sitting behind the counter, and she smiles, nice teeth. And she asks, can I help you? And I say, no, you're looking for a room for one night. Oh, I'm so sorry. You're all booked solid. And I think, good. Now we have to go to a motel and it'll be much cheaper. But, she said, we still have the bridal suite available. My wife says, we'll take it. I gasped when I heard the price. But again, there was that small voice inside me that said, you better take your medicine. So I signed papers and get a key of the bridal suite. And the pretty woman says, do you need some assistance in carrying your luggage? And I said, no. Because I thought I will have to pay another $10 for simply carrying my luggage. We go to the car, get our luggage, overnight bag. We go to the bridal suite. The door opens, and another pretty lady stands there, smiles and says, everything is ready. And she holds the door open. I think she thought that I would carry my wife over the threshold. Now, to be honest, 30 years later, I think it was a very nice bridal suite. It was a nice fire, I remember, and there were beautiful French doors and a balcony with lawn chairs, and I could see the silhouette of the surrounding mountains, and some of the stars were twinkling. And there was that bed. I mean, a bed. 4-poster bed with a canopy, and there were roses on the pillow. There was a heart-shaped box with chocolate, and there was an ice bucket with champagne and glasses. I mean, it was really sweet. It was very nice. And I said, Kathy, you can use the bathroom first. When I came out of the bathroom, she was already in bed at the edge, pretending to be asleep. I went to the other side, got into bed, turned off the light and said, good night, Kathy. And I assumed that meant good night, Frans. And I was mad at myself. In one night, we would spend the entire vacation money. Only because I forgot to bring those stupid tent poles. I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned. Finally, I fell asleep. But then I woke up, because it was a nightmare probably. I read in the local newspaper headlines, woman kills husband in bridal bed. It was very quiet, I thought. So I whispered my words of contrition, soft enough so that if she were asleep, I wouldn't wake her up, but clearly enough so that if she were awake, she would realize that I was really asking for forgiveness. But it was all quiet, which only could mean that she was really planning to kill me. But eventually I again fell asleep, and we woke up this following morning at the same time. We got ready to go for breakfast. We stepped out of the bridal room. And there are two chambermaids, and they look at us and they start to laugh. We must have looked like we had quite a night in the bridal bed. We had quite a night, but not the kind they were thinking of. There was some polite conversation in the very pretty dining room. And we returned the key afterwards, get into the car, drive the 6 miles up north to Joseph. And yes, there was a store where they only sold camping equipment. And we got a nice tent, too expensive, but that was tent number 5. We put it back in the car. And just when we want to step in the car, Kathy walks towards me, puts her hand on my arm and says, "Ach, Frans, I always wanted to sleep in a bridal suite, in a 4-poster bed with a canopy." And then she hugged me, and I knew that I was forgiven. We had a great vacation in the Bahamas, but the following years, when we went camping, I always took 2 tents with me, in case one of them was not complete. And when they told my story to friends of mine, they promised that when I die, they will put some extra tent poles in my coffin.